This is my answer to the creative challenge for the AI planning course. I've decided to focus on demonstrating the application of AI planning that I imagine we might see in the future. In the course, we have seen examples of AI planning being used for planning, assembly, testing of Ariane rockets, and for planning of search and rescue missions and other things. But few of these something that is actually related to regular people's everyday lives, and I imagine that in the future AI planning might be used more for these kind of things. Imagine, for instance, that I would want to go to Edinburgh for a weekend. The band PTDL and the Strips Planners are playing in Edinburgh, and I've decided that I would actually want to go. So the way it is today, I would then sit down in front of my computer, I would buy the tickets, I would book a hotel, I would book the plane tickets, and so on and so forth. Even though the computer is an important part of this planning, the planning activity itself is something that I as a human being need to do. And this is what I predict is something that might change in the future. The way I've decided to illustrate that is that the rest of this presentation is going to be a demonstration of an imaginary planning application that can do trip planning. And I've decided to call it Trip Planner. And Trip Planner is a service from the imaginary future. The way the Trip Planner works is that you device, start the Trip Planner application, and start planning. The way that works is that you define the goal of the plan. In this case, I'm going to a concert in Edinburgh, and I'm going there the 1st of April, and I'm going to Edinburgh Concert Hall. And maybe there are other details that I might need to define in order to make clear what the goal of the plan is. And because the goal of this plan is for me to go to a concert and having a good time, I would probably need to also define that I start from home and that I need to return home. And I probably also would need to have some more generic constraints on the plan, like the budget, how much am I willing to pay for a hotel, how much am I willing to pay for a flight, things like that. And once I have a sufficient definition of the goal of the plan, I can ask the trip planner to create a plan for me. So what it then does is that it takes this abstract task that I have given it and then breaks it down to atomic actions that I can then perform when I decide to execute the plan. So the part of what the trip planner does is that it realizes that if I'm going to a concert in Edinburgh, what I have to do is, of course, get there first, and to do that I need an airplane ticket, and in addition I probably want to stay at a hotel because I live far away from Edinburgh, and maybe the hotel that it suggests to me is something that is reasonable convenience, distance from the concert hall, and relatively close to the airport, or at least easy to get to, and so on and so forth. It will create this list of steps and then present it for me. And here it is a draft of these that I can then go through. Perhaps I would want to have a list of the hotels and not only have it suggest one for me, but 3 or 4, so that I can pick another one, and in that way I can make adjustments to the plan. And perhaps at this point I realize that now I am going to Edinburgh, I may want to stay a little bit longer, do some sightseeing and so on, so I can add additional sub-goals to my plan and ask it to recreate a new one. And what it then does is that it creates these tasks, and for each of these actions it also defines preconditions that needs to be met for me to be able to perform them. Like, for instance, if I'm actually going to Scotland on a plane, I would need to have a ticket for that plane. And it will also identify such a task as not only something that needs to be taken care of in advance, but something that the trip planner itself can actually do for me. So once I'm happy with the plan, I can simply ask the trip planner to do the necessary booking on my behalf. And what it then does here is that it presents the things that it has found out is something that needs to be booked, and it has went out on the web and found prices for each of these things, and perhaps of reserving these different tickets, and I can then look at them and confirm that these are actually within a reasonable price and so on. And each of these four things is something that I already mentioned before, is something that you today can do on a computer. So the trip planner is actually just interfacing to already existing service. This is of course not a trivial task, but it's reasonable to imagine that in your future that it is possible for the trip planner to do it, since it is possible for a human being to do it on a computer. So once you have done that and then confirmed it, it will then go out to the same web services and actually buy the tickets for you. And once you have done that, the trip planning activity in itself is actually over. It has done the plan for you. It can then, in theory, print it out on paper, a scheduled plan that you can execute with all the steps on the way, and it can also print out on paper all the tickets and reservation numbers you need to perform the plan. But why stop there? Since many people today have in their pocket a smartphone or similar device, a smartphone that has GPS and internet access and so on, therefore it will be possible for something like the trip planner to actually not just do the planning for you, but also assist you in executing the plan. And the first part of executing the plan would be to make sure that you are prepared before the trip. And this I've illustrated here by that it creates a to-do list of things that I would need on the trip. Like, for instance, based on the trip that it has planned for me, it knows a list of things that I would want to bring, and it may also know that on a similar trip, things that I usually bring, which I can then of course change. And since the trip planner did the booking of the plane for me, it will also know that for this specific trip there is a limit to the size of the handbag that I can bring and so on. And the first step it can do in assisting me in actually execute the plan is reminding me the day before to go through this to-do list and make sure that I have remembered everything. And already today many airlines have the possibility that you can go in and on the internet check in advance. So the trip planner simply suggests that it can do this on your behalf. So when the day then comes, the trip planner will then be your trip guide, your personal assistant in helping you in each step of the way on the trip. Since you have the trip planner on your smartphone, and the smartphone has the GPS and internet access, and it obviously also has a clock, it knows where you are, it knows what time it is, it also knows where you're going, and it knows when you're going to be there, so it will be able to follow along and make sure that you achieve all the things that is necessary for you to actually go where you want to go. And to the extent that you find it necessary, it might be able to give you further assistance. Perhaps you get to Edinburgh and you're not quite sure of where the hotel is, so you ask the trip planner to show you a map of where you are and where the hotel is and guide you there. And already today, this is something that most people will probably use their smartphone for and use that as a navigation device and have it show a map for you. So all the trip planner have to do is simply interface with such a already existing navigation application. The difference here, of course, is that the trip planner knows the context and knows in advance that you might want to have this information, so it can have it ready for you when you are actually getting close to the hotel. And then again, we all know that things doesn't always go according to plan, so it of course have to be possible at any time for you to simply change the plans for one reason or another. And all this is for the purpose of you to get there on your trip easier by the trip planner assisting you in each of these steps in such a way that you as a person can focus more on actually enjoying the trip you're on. And once you have done that and are back home, then the trip planner will then ask you to get some feedback on the trip you were on, like for instance, rate the hotel you chose and similar things in such a way that in the future it will be able to create better plans for you. And once you've done that, the trip is over, and so is my presentation. Hope you enjoyed it.